City. It is Thursday, November 10th, 2022. We moved our typical Tuesday meeting to Thursday so that everyone could participate in their elections. I hope everyone voted that was eligible to. I will read our opening words. Welcome to today's meeting. We continue to host hybrid meetings to keep everyone safe and healthy. Our meetings are public and you're welcome to join in person or by watching from the Council's agenda page, Facebook, YouTube, or SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whatever manner you feel most comfortable. If you are here to give public comment and are wearing a mask, feel free to remove it once you get called to address the Council at the podium. Thank you for participating today. The first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, and thank you again for joining us tonight. If you would like to give public comment today, we are accepting comments in person and online via WebEx. Before we begin moving through our agenda, I want to mention and review our rules of decorum. The City Council has always had guidelines in place to ensure our meetings are orderly, civil, and efficient. The guidelines help everyone feel comfortable sharing their comments without feeling intimidated. To achieve this, our rules of decorum take effect the moment you arrive. We respect all points of view and welcome new insights. Please be respectful while sharing your comments. Avoid yelling, using profanity, making racial slurs, or obscene or defamatory remarks. If you violate this rule, we will mute your line or ask you to stop. If you feel you need to use such language to express your opinions, you may email council members or leave a message on our 24-hour comment line. Additionally, staff will be requesting your name during the WebEx registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of decorum. If your name doesn't comply, our staff will let you know. For those joining on WebEx, please watch your chat window in case we try to reach you. Isaac Canedo from our staff will be moderating the WebEx meeting tonight and will message you with any questions about your registration. Staff is handling many tasks, so please limit messages to technical issues and minimal information updates. If you'd like to send any comments to the City Council, feel free to either mail to P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or email council.comments@slcgov.com, or call our comment line at 801-535-7654. So the next item is item A4. The council will approve meeting minutes from several meetings. And I'm told by Cindy Lou that we do not need to read all of them. You may just make a motion to approve the minutes as listed in the agenda. So I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes as on the agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Dugan and a second from Councilmember Wharton. Any discussion on this motion? I will roll call. I'll roll call. Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Pui? Fowler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. This brings us to item A5, which is a joint ceremonial resolution with Mayor Mendenhall declaring November 20th as Transgender Day of Remembrance in Salt Lake City. I'm going to turn the time over to Councilmember Chris Wharton to read our resolution.
Thank you. This is a joint resolution recognizing November 20th as Transgender Day of Remembrance in Salt Lake City. Whereas in 1998, Rita Hester, a transgender woman of color, was murdered in Allston, Massachusetts, and whereas the following year, Gwendolyn Ann Smith, a transgender woman, created the first Transgender Day of Remembrance in honor of Rita Hester and other transgender people who have lost their lives to violence. And whereas Transgender Day of Remembrance is observed annually to memorialize those lives that have been lost as a result of transphobic violence. And whereas, according to the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, at least 32 transgender or gender nonconforming people have died due to transphobic violence in the United States in 2020 alone, as of November 4th. And whereas the true number of victims is unknown because of intentional misgendering and the difficulty identifying the bodies of many victims. And whereas transgender individuals, especially transgender people of color, continue to be disproportionately affected by education discrimination, employment discrimination, bullying, limited access to health care, domestic violence, homelessness, economic instability, and poverty. And whereas the transgender community has been particularly hard hit by the continuing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas since 2006, Transgender Education Advocates, or T of Utah, has organized a vigil in Salt Lake City every year, and whereas Salt Lake City values the lives and contributions to our community by transgender people, and whereas Salt Lake City has the responsibility to promote equality and prosperity for all members of the transgender community, and whereas Salt Lake City is proud to stand against the discrimination of transgender people. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor of Salt Lake City strongly value the lives and contributions of transgender people, honor those lives that have been lost as a result of transphobic violence throughout the United States of America and the world, and formally recognize Saturday, November 20th, as Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Thank you, Councilmember Wharton.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move that we adopt the resolution.
Is there a
Second.
second? I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilmember Wharton. Any discussion on this motion? I will roll call it. Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Bowie?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Petruschler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. In Salt Lake City, we're proud to stand up against transphobic violence, and we thank local organizations such as the Utah Pride Center or Transgender Education Advocates, T of Utah, and others who work tirelessly to support and protect our transgender neighbors. I see that Tanya Hawkins, co-CEO of the Utah Pride Center, is here. We'd like to give you a minute to speak if you would like to say anything. Otherwise, please come up and take a picture at least, right? Photo?
Yes.
If you, feel free to say anything or just come take a picture with us, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Okay.
Smile.
3, 2, 1. Perfect. Awesome. Yep.
Mr.
right.
Chair,
yes.
sorry. I should have said this earlier when you asked for comments, but I just wanted to note that we've passed this resolution a couple times, and this year was particularly sad because between the time that we were drafting the resolution and circulating it for approval, we had to amend it because several more transgender people had been killed. So,
I didn't know that.
yeah, just want to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So that now brings us to section B of our agenda. That is the public hearings. Taylor Hill on our staff will be calling the names of those who wish to comment. We will call names of people on WebEx and in person based on the order of registration or received comment cards. If you're here in person and you want to make a comment and you have not filled out a comment card, I think they're right outside the door. Once we open public comment, Taylor will announce 3 names at a time so that people have some notice and are able to prepare to speak. When it's your turn to speak, Taylor will announce your name. If you're on WebEx, your line will unmute and you may begin. If you're here in person, please step up to the podium and state your name, and your 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, staff will announce time. If you are unable to finish your comment, please send the rest via email, mail, or by calling our office. Our contact information is available in the meeting room and in the WebEx chat. If you no longer wish to speak, either message our staff or when staff states your name, just let us know you're here to listen. So our first public hearing is item B1. B1 is a rezone at 856 West, 1300 South. Before we begin taking comments, I'll turn the time to Brian Fulmer, one of our council staff policy analysts, to give us a short introduction to this item. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the zoning map for property at 856 West, 1300 South from its current R1 5000 single-family residential zoning to FBUN2, or form-based urban neighborhood. The petitioner stated they intend to construct 6 for-sale townhomes on the property. An existing single-family home on the site is proposed to be removed as part of the development. Thank you.
Brian, in the agenda it says FBUN1. I think did you mention
FBUN1.
Is 1 the correct?
I believe so.
Okay, thanks. All right, Taylor, will you please start with our first public comment?
Council Chair, it looks like there's one person here to speak to this item. That will be Tyler Jack. And it looks like I am unable to mute Tyler, so let me message with him real quick.
You want us to just wait for a second?
Yeah, give me like 30 seconds.
Okay.
Is there hold music?
Jeopardy music. Taylor, should we move on to item B2 and then see if Tyler comes back online?
Yes.
Okay, we'll skip item B1 for now. So we'll keep that public hearing open for a few more minutes, and we'll go to item B2. B2 is a resolution for our digital equipment donation program, the benefits analysis and recommendation. Before we begin taking comments, Sylvia Richards, another council staff policy analyst who is online, will give us a short introduction. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city adopted a digital equity policy in September of 2020 with the intent to bridge the technology gap in Salt Lake City communities. A pilot digital equipment donation program was created, and phase 2 of the program is proposing to donate surplus computers to community organizations which serve families and individuals with digital resource needs. This public hearing is being held in connection with the public benefits analysis submitted by the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Council Chair, it looks like there is no one here to speak to this item.
All right, there are no public comments. Anyone in the audience want to speak to this item? Okay, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer item B2 to a future consent agenda for action.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Dugan, a second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion to this motion? I'll start this time with Councilmember Wharton.
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Peter-Eschler?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. Let's see, we're now, is Tyler back?
I still haven't received a response, so I think maybe we could add him to general comment if he responds.
Okay, so, and there's no one else here to speak to item B1, that is the 856 West 1300 South rezone.
Correct.
So I guess I'll look for a motion to close that.
Madam,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
I'm not offended.
I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, second from Councilmember Dugan. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will roll call. Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Peter-Eschler?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. Okay, that brings us to item B3, and I don't think anyone's here to talk to that one, but just kidding. That is an ordinance rezone and master plan amendment for 675 North F Street, Capitol Park Cottages. The petitioner is Ivory Development. Before we begin taking public comment, I will turn the time over to Nick Tarbett, another council staff policy analyst who's here in person to give a short introduction.
Yeah. So this proposal would amend the master plan designation for the property in the Avenues Community Master Plan from very low density to low density and rezone the property from FR3 12,000 to SR1. The request is intended to help accommodate a request from Ivory Development for a 19-lot single-family dwelling development.
Thank you, Nick. Taylor, go ahead and start with our first comment.
Council Chair, it looks like there are about 37 people here to speak to this item. The first will be Linda Dean, followed by Alan Hayes, and then Charlie Cannon. Linda is here in person to speak.
Thank you.
Good evening. You will need a handout, the council members, which Peter Wright will be handing out before I commence my 2-minute speech.
The 2 minutes started already.
Oh.
Oh.
Well,
It's starting now.
Started it over.
Okay.
Starting over, so go ahead.
Sorry, I can't do it until you have the handout.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, Taylor, go ahead and start the clock.
Good evening. I'm Linda Dean, and I would like to speak to page 1 of our handout. Ivory has 4 requests from the city: a rezone from FR3 to SR1, an amendment to the Avenues Master Plan, approval of a plan development, and finally, approval of a plat plan. It is normal practice for these requests to be considered together by the Planning Commission before arriving at a recommendation regarding the rezone. This was not done. After almost 3 years, Ivory's plat plan is incomplete and non-conforming. Members of the Planning Commission themselves questioned this process, asking if Ivory had presented the cart before the horse. The rezone cannot be considered in isolation without knowing what the applicant wishes to do with that rezone if granted. This application must be evaluated in the whole, not in parts. It is the combined impact of a radical rezone used to shrink lot sizes by almost 60%, a plan development used to reduce setbacks such that not a single lot conforms with zone requirements, and a flawed plat plan that obliterates the natural terrain that render this proposed development so objectionable and problematic. We ask that the City Council assess this proposal as a whole, and believe if you do so, you will understand why the Avenues community is nearly unanimously opposed to this excessive and deeply flawed development. We look to you, our elected representatives, as the check and balance in defending residents. As a powerful developer intent on maximizing profit, while Ivory does little to advance key city goals of affordability, sustainability, and walkability. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Next will be Alan Hayes, followed by Charlie Cannon, and then Judy Denker. Alan is here in person.
Namaste, City Councilors and staff. Good evening, Peter. I'm Al Hayes. Ivory seeks 3 big legal gifts from the city to put more front doors on this lot than would be allowed under the current zone. First, a rezone to increase the number of lots from a max of 11 to 19. Second, Ivory seeks to utilize the ADU ordinance to add ADUs to 14 of these newly created lots, and asks the city to waive the owner-occupier rule. Third, Ivory asks for a planned development to get more lots, shrink setbacks further, and build non-compliant retaining walls than SR1 would normally allow. Ivory could have built 11 homes with 11 ADUs on this lot by right. They could have started building 2 years ago and saved the city and the neighborhood and themselves a whole lot of time and energy. They may claim that the neighborhood opposition is costing them time and money, but it is their decisions that are costing them and the city. 2 years of Daniel Echeverria's time and now yours. Another big gift, 4 gifts. Ivory is very clever in their marketing. They would have you think they are providing a big increase in housing as recompense. Let's see, 19 minus 11 is 8 more $1 million plus homes. That's something, I'll admit it. But does it match what the city is being asked to grant Ivory? And 14 minus 11 is 3 additional rental units. The city has what, 20,000 rental units in process? Lots of big gifts, not much in return. Thank you.
Alan.
And next will be Charlie Cannon, followed by Judy Denker, and then Paul McKinnon. Charlie's here in person.
Good evening, I'm Charlie Cannon. I would like to speak to Ivory's plat plan. That's page 3 of our handout. Even a most casual glance at this plan will show you how much more crowded this development is, not just compared to FR3 development, but also compared to our current development in the avenues. The homes that Ivory refers to as cottages are all large, 2-story buildings with 4 or 5 bedrooms, plus 3-car garages. These homes are 2 to 3 times larger than the majority of SR1 homes and will not fit a standard SR1 meeting setback requirement. So in addition to a radical rezone which cuts lot sizes by almost 60%, Ivory wants to plan development to reduce setbacks in the following way. 4 lots do meet the minimum requirements. 13 of 19 do not meet the minimum front yard setback. 13 of 19 do not meet the minimum side yard setback. 19 of 19 do not meet the minimum rear yard setback, resulting in large 2-story buildings 10 feet apart and 10 feet from the curb. Ivory overbuilds this foothill with so much hardscape that a large drainage basin is needed, which Ivory disingenuously calls a private park. As you will see later, a completely flawed grading scheme, totally alien to the avenues, obliterates the natural terrain, requiring 1,625 linear feet of retaining walls as high as 17 feet that scar the hillside. Review Ivory's plan and take a walk around the avenues. It won't take you 5 minutes to realize that this development fits like Cinderella's glass slipper fits on her ugly sister's foot. Thank you.
Next will be Judy Denker, followed by Paul McKinnon, and then Susie Polychronis. Judy is here in person.
Good evening. I'm Judy Denker. I'm a retired Salt Lake City police captain and a 3rd-generation resident of 13th Avenue property adjacent to Ivory's property. I wish to speak to page 4 of our handout. A rezone. A rezone is a big deal, or at least it should be. Much thought goes into much thought goes into zoning designations, and there is a strong need for consistency. The city cannot reasonably apply a different zone to every block in the city just because a developer asks for a rezone to line its own pockets. Rezoning can have substantial impact on the community, the environment, and, as in this case, safety with regards to adjacent neighborhoods and homes. Very careful consideration should also be given to rezoning in our environmentally sensitive foothills, also adding excess density to wildlife-urban interface areas at high risk of wildfire. Community opinion should also matter. Residents who live in a particular neighborhood tend to understand the complexities far better than those with only a casual knowledge of the neighborhood. Beware of too zealously implementing citywide policies that make no sense in a particular location. One size does not fit all. The city has in the past only granted a rezone request if that rezone brings substantial public benefit in the terms of affordability, sustainability, walkability, and the generation of family-friendly housing. Ivory's proposed development brings none of these benefits. Ivory holds out the lure of 14 ADUs, but as a developer, they cannot guarantee a single ADU. Only an owner-occupant can actually transform a structure into an ADU. The number of ADUs that will be created is unknowable.
Thank you, Judy.
Next will be Paul McKinnon, followed by Susie Polychronis, and then Nat Dean. Paul is here in person.
Thank you. I'm Paul McKinnon. I'm here to speak on behalf of the more than 2,000 forgotten and ignored residents of the Avenues who signed a petition in opposition to this rezoning. Specifically, I would like to speak to the issue of affordable housing referenced on page 4. A few weeks ago, I listened to a presentation from the Planning Division advocating an affordable housing initiative where the city would grant concessions to developers in exchange for the creation of affordable housing. Ivory asks for a series of concessions, far greater than those envisioned by the Affordable Housing Initiative, but Ivory creates no affordable housing. In early 2021, Ivory told us that the units with ADUs would sell for in excess of $1 million, presumably more like 1.5 million today. Rentals of the ADUs will be at market rates, which real estate agents tell us would be in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. The 5 custom houses on F Street on lots created by the rezone will likely sell in the $2 million range. Does this sound like affordable housing to you, or do these homes cater to the top 1%? It's very easy to see what Ivory gets, but what does the city get from all the concessions demanded by Ivory? Creation of the 14 ADUs that Ivory promises is extremely questionable. Besides which, ADUs can already be created under the current zoning. Ivory's application does nothing to help with the city's acute shortage of affordable housing. There's only one winner here, and that's Ivory.
Next will be Susie Polychronis, followed by Nat Dean, and then Larry Perkins. Susie is here in person to speak.
Hello, my name is Susie Polychronis, and I would like to address the issue of walkability referenced on page 4 of our handout. All of the city policy documents call for density to be added to walkable sections of the city close to mass transit and amenities. This is not such an area. The development is 1.1 miles down a steep grade to South Temple and 1.8 miles to Harmon's or the City Creek Mall. So walking or cycling up and down is totally impractical for most people. The closest grocery store is Smith's, located on East Street and 6th Avenue. The streets between 13th and 6th Avenue are incredibly steep. It is not at all feasible to walk between Smith's and Ivory's development with heavy grocery bags during temperate months, let alone when it is snowy and icy. There are intermittent sidewalks between 11th and 13th Avenue, which makes it even more dangerous, especially in the winter months. There is no real public transportation to speak of. The information provided in Ivory's application is incorrect. The bus service no longer comes to 13th Avenue, and one has to walk a third of a mile to 11th Avenue, down the equivalent of 10 flights of stairs to the nearest bus stop. If it is a snowy or icy day, the bus does not go above 3rd Avenue for safety reasons. All of these considerations lead to private automobiles being the only practical means of transportation with all of the attendant environmental problems. The current zoning of FR3 is far more appropriate for this area. There is insufficient infrastructure to support the number of households that Ivory is proposing. I appreciate your time and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Susie.
Next is Nat Dean, followed by Larry Perkins, and then Lon Jenkins. Nat is here in person.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Nathan Dean. I'm an academic pulmonary physician at Intermountain Medical Center and the University of Utah. I'm also a member of the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment who oppose this problematic development. I'm speaking on sustainability, also referenced on page 4, but actually the lack thereof with Ivory's proposal. Ivory's lot contains over 20 majestic trees close to 100 years old, but all will be torn out. These trees have survived without irrigation, absorbing carbon dioxide, providing shade and habitat for owls and hawks. When North Point and Capitol Park were developed, the city mandated that mature trees be mainly preserved. With a well-designed FR3 development, many of these trees could also be preserved. All city policy statements stress that density be added to walkable sections of the city, close to mass transit and amenities. Are these policy statements just lip service? Assuming 2 cars per residence, Ivory's proposed development will add an additional 48 cars over a normal FR3 development. Based on EPA data, these additional cars will generate an incremental 221 tons of carbon dioxide annually. Ivory's design with narrow driveways accessing multiple garages requires extensive shuttling, generating noxious startup pollution. And then short trips up and down this hilly location are the most polluting, thereby worsening Salt Lake City's already unhealthy air. We have a housing shortage, but we also have a severe air quality problem. We cannot solve one problem at the expense of the other. Ivory's proposal will negatively impact our children's future by worsening avenues and Salt Lake City air quality and accelerating climate change. Thank you.
Next will be Larry Perkins, followed by Lon Jenkins, and then Dirk Van Claver. Larry is here in person to speak.
My name is Larry Perkins. I'm the treasurer of the Capitol Park Homeowners Association. When the Capitol Park neighborhood was developed in the 1990s, Salt Lake City was unwilling to pay for the roads that service our community, so they are paid for and maintained by the Meridian and Capitol Park Homeowners Associations. These roads were designed to meet the needs of this low-volume community and are approved by Salt Lake City on that basis. For the 10-year period between 2005 and 2015, the Capitol Park and Meridian Homeowners Associations petitioned the city to take over responsibility for these private roads. The city refused to do that on the basis that these streets are too narrow and do not meet city standards. Now Ivory Homes asks you to disregard the zoning that has guided development of this neighborhood for the last 35 years. They want you to allow the only access to their 28 interior residences to be via our private roads. Now Ivory does have an easement that grants access to Capitol Park Avenue. That easement was initially granted by a member of the LDS Church to the LDS Church when that church owned this parcel that Ivory now owns. The easement was intended to access a church parking lot that would have incurred only limited traffic on Sundays, not for a high-density residential development. Under the terms of this easement, Ivory also pays only a pittance for the cost of maintaining a small portion of Capitol Park Avenue. But Ivory Homes displays no conscience about overburdening the narrow private street that is sustained not by themselves, not by the city, but by me and my neighbors. Approving this zoning would be grossly unfair to those of us who bore the financial responsibility for creating and now maintain these residential streets. Please deny this zoning application.
Next will be Lon Jenkins, followed by Dirk Van Claveren, and then Sarah DeLonc. Lon is here in person.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Lon Jenkins. I would direct your attention to page 6 of the handout as it discusses the impact of city-owned land, which I will be addressing. When the city designed the public street system for the avenues, it wisely granted itself a wide right-of-way for all roads that serve this community. The roads do not consume all of the right-of-way, such that there is typically around 22 feet of city-owned land on each side of the avenue streets. The city-owned land is not maintained by the city and has been integrated into the individual properties such that it is indistinguishable from them. The presence of this substantial city-owned land increases front and corner side yard setbacks to an average of around 42 feet, compared to the mostly 10 to 15 feet for Ivory's development, which, as you can see, is a massive difference. The Planning Division's measure of density ignores this very substantial impact of city-owned land, which effectively increases the size of a block by 28%, decreasing density by the same amount. The city-owned land helps give the avenues a green, pleasant, and leafy appeal, despite having relatively small 5,000 square foot lot sizes in the SR zone. Ivory's development lacks any substantial city-owned land, decreasing the density by only 1% from 10.3 units to 10.2 units per acre. The impact of city-owned land is highly significant and should be taken into account in considering the radical change from FR3 to SR1 zoning, significantly reducing lot sizes where there is no compensating city land to buffer the intensity of these formidable structures that Ivory proposes to build. City-owned land is particularly important in the avenues, as the avenues has much smaller block sizes than the rest of the city. Thank you for your time.
Next is Dirk Van Claveren, followed by Sarah DeLong, and then Scott Young. Dirk is here in person.
Good evening. I'm Dirk Van Claveren, an 18-year resident of the Avenues. Ivory refers to the houses they wish to build on this property as cottages, generally defined as small one-story houses. These homes are not cottages. Shown on the handout are the elevations and specifications for the multi-generational units that make up 11 of the 14 units with ADUs. The 5 custom homes on F Street will likely be larger still. As you can see, these units are large, 2-story houses with 5 bedrooms and 3-car garages, not cottages. If you can imagine 9 such large buildings, 10 feet apart and set 5 feet or 10 feet from the road, interspersed by massive retaining walls. This is what Ivory plans to build if this rezone is granted. Does this look like anything in the Avenues? Does this constitute sensitive infill? The Avenues is eclectic with a wide range of building styles and home sizes. However, approximately 74% of the SR zoned block section Avenues homes are small, single-story houses with an average grade size of around 1,100 square feet, about a third of the size of the houses Ivory proposes. Where larger homes exist, these are generally on larger lots. There are no blocks anywhere in the Avenues where all of the homes are 2-story units comparable to those being proposed by Ivory. I would encourage you to deny the Ivory request for this rezone. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Sarah DeLong, followed by Scott Young, and then Joel Deaton. Sarah is here in person.
Good evening. I am Sarah DeLong. I'd like to speak to page 8 of our handout. The Planning Division highlighted 3 blocks on 10th Avenue as being comparable to Ivory's development in terms of density as measured by number of units per acre. As discussed earlier, this metric takes no account of the very significant amount of city-owned land that borders all of these homes. Nor does this metric consider building density or the relative size of the homes, nor does it consider setbacks. Shown on page 8 are photographs of all the homes on 10th Avenue from 2 of the blocks considered comparable, based only on the number of units per acre. Do these homes look anything like those proposed by Ivory? Do they seem comparable to you? These homes are very typical of most homes in the SR block section of the Avenues. Shown is the above-ground square footage for each home taken from the Salt Lake County Assessor database. The above-ground square footage of these homes averages 1,060 square feet, compared with 3,777 square feet for Ivory's multi-gen units. It's 3 times the size. These homes are also spaced an average of 26 feet apart, compared to mostly 10 feet for Ivory. Also, as you look at these homes, you can see the very considerable amount of front setback to the road. Much of what you see here is city-owned land, which is indistinguishable from the lot. Front setbacks to the road here average 42 feet, compared to mostly 10 feet for Ivory's units with ADUs. Squeezing FR3-sized homes onto SR1-sized lots with minimal setback does not make a compatible or attractive development. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Scott Young, followed by Joel Deaton, and then Bob Kinney. Scott is here in person.
Good evening. I would like to address Ivory's proposed abusive use of retaining walls as shown on page 9 of the handout. Throughout the avenues, individual lots follow the contour of the hillside with sufficient space between buildings to manage grade transitions and prevent erosion and landslides, and where retaining walls are generally small. Ivory's 5 custom homes on F Street follow this pattern, but the rest of Ivory's proposed development ignores the established pattern. Instead, Ivory proposes a design with paired homes and driveways on each side of the road that requires bulldozing the hillside into large, flat, multi-building terraces. Ivory's design obliterates the natural terrain and requires a proliferation of massive retaining walls. Ivory's proposes over 1,600 linear feet of retaining wall, with most being 13 to 17 feet high, and requires a variance from city code requirements for the retaining wall's structure, none of which has been approved by the city engineers. Ivory's proposed retaining walls are not reflective of the neighborhood, do not create any open space, and create safety hazards. Why? Because Ivory makes more money. FR3 zoning exists for a reason. It recognizes the need to limit housing density in highly sloped foothill areas, to leave room for grade transitions, to protect land from erosion and other hazards, and to protect the residents in surrounding neighborhoods. We urge you to deny Ivory's rezoning request. Thank you.
And next will be Joel Deaton, followed by Bob Kinney, and then Cindy Van Claveren. Joel is here in person.
Good evening. I'm Joel Deaton, and I'm chair of the North Point HOA Management Committee. I'll be speaking to pages 10 and 11 of the handout. North Point has 49 homes sharing a 415 feet boundary with Ivory's property. North Point has one egress and ingress via North Point Drive, which runs the length of the northern boundary of the Ivory property. North Point Drive is currently supported by a short retaining wall up to 5 feet in height with 6 feet of railings between columns, as shown on the left side photograph on page 10. The right side illustration shows what major sections of this boundary would look like under Ivory's flawed grading scheme. In order to create flat building terraces and maximize density, Ivory excavates 13 feet of land below and directly in front of North Point's current boundary wall. The combined height of these walls plus North Point's current boundary wall and railing combination is a staggering 24 feet. This massive retaining structure, not built to city code as shown on page 11, not only provides a hideous backdrop to the entire development, but threatens North Point's only ingress and egress. Such large retaining walls are vulnerable to collapse induced by bad workmanship, mudslides, and even minor seismic activity. You may remember the collapse of the retaining wall at Judge Memorial Stadium. This is not so very different to the wall proposed by Ivory. North Point cannot risk its only ingress and egress being compromised to satisfy Ivory's desire for increased density and property and profit. Please take a hard look at the illustration on the right of page 10, which runs the length of a football field, and ask yourself, is this the type of structure we need to be creating in our foothills residential areas to add a few more housing units. Thank you for your time.
Next will be Bob Kinney, followed by Cindy Van Claveren, and then Don Warmbier. Bob is here in person to speak.
Good evening. My name is Bob Kinney. I too am going to reference a few pages in the books you have in front of you. I would like you to take a close look at the units shown on pages 13 and 14. Page 13 shows units on the northern boundary. Under the current FR3 zoning, the rear setback would be a minimum of 35 feet, and under SR1 zoning, it would be around 25 feet. Ivory asks for a rear setback as low as 10 feet. Into that 10 feet, they have to accommodate a multi-step retaining wall that supports not a flower bed, but North Point Drive, which is North Point's only ingress and egress. If built to city code, these retaining walls will not fit into the allotted space. Hence, Ivory asks for the variance. No backyards, no green space, and cars passing at bedroom window height just a few feet from these units on the northern boundary. This is an appallingly poor design. Please turn to page 14. Here we have exceedingly tall retaining walls running both north-south and east-west. Again, if built to city code, these multi-step walls will not fit into the 10 feet separation between buildings. Please look at Unit 9 in the center of this illustration. Here we have a 15-foot high wall to the north and a 17-foot high wall to the east, 5 feet from the house in question. This house will have no views other than a retaining wall from the first or second floor windows and spacing so tight that it will be difficult to walk even single file around that building. It is a simple fact that when building on highly sloped lots, there is a need to leave space for grade transitions. This is one of the primary reasons why our foothills are zoned FR3 with larger lot sizes. I would ask you to reject Ivory's rezone application. Thank you.
Next will be Cindy Van Claveren, followed by Don Warmbier, and then Cherry Daly. Cindy is here in person.
Good evening. I am Cindy Van Claveren, a retired educator living at North Point. I would like to speak about child safety in relation to Ivory's tall retaining walls as shown on page 15. Mr. Kinney has just shown you that lot number 9 is surrounded both by a 15-foot retaining wall to the north and a 17-foot retaining wall to the east. This illustration of the eastern wall, drawn to scale, shows how horrendously dangerous these tall retaining walls are to children. An adult will see a safety barrier. A child sees something to climb on. This is not reasonable nor responsible design. I'm going to pause now for a few seconds. Instead of listening to me, I ask you to look, and I mean really look, at that illustration on page 15 and imagine a child falling from this 17 feet high wall. These tall retaining walls are a result of adding too many large buildings, too much building density to this highly sloped lot. This is a design that does not allow space for gradual or stepped grade transitions. Please, members of the City Council, I implore you, do not allow Ivory Homes to construct this development in a manner that so clearly puts our children at risk. If you do not protect children from this danger, no one else will. Thank you.
Next will be Don Warmbier, followed by Cherry Daly, and then Peter Wright. Don's here in person.
I'm Don Warmbier of North Point, and I'll be speaking on wildfire safety on page 16. Both North Point and Ivory's property are in a wildland urban interface at high risk from wildfire. The Salt Lake Fire Department has published a guide to fire-adapted communities that calls upon you to use zoning proactively in wildland urban interfaces to decrease the risk of damage from future wildfires. But making this zoning change would instead actually increase the risk of damage from future wildfires. North Point has only one entrance and exit via F Street. When North Point residents are trying to escape a wildfire, parking on both sides of F Street by guests of the added residents this zoning change allows would narrow the fire department's F Street access to North Point to only one vehicle lane. If the council, like the Planning Commission, ignores the fire department guide and refuses to consider the impact of this zoning change on the wildfire safety of North Point, it will be committing gross negligence. And due to a waiver of government immunity, the city could be liable for wildfire damage to North Point. Do not sacrifice the wildfire safety of North Point residents, and do not expose the city to liability for wildfire damage.
Next will be Cherry Daly, followed by Peter Wright, and then Jan McKinnon. Cherry's here in person.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Daly. City ordinances state that FR3 zoning is intended for the majority of foothills areas. FR3 is already the most dense of the city's 3 foothill zoning designations. FR3 zoning exists in foothill locations specifically to protect against natural hazards such as landslides, floods, and erosion. This zoning also restricts density in wildland-urban interface areas to provide a buffer zone for wildlife and to put fewer people at risk from fast-moving wildfires. Shown on page 17 of your handout is the southern section of Ivory's development. Ivory builds so much hardscape that a large, unsightly drainage basin is required and placed alongside Capitol Park Avenue. Other speakers have shown you that the homes Ivory proposes are at least 2 times the norm for SR1 size lots. Not surprisingly, hardscape at 54% is also 2 times the norm for either an SR1 or an FR3 development, causing drainage problems. Ivory disingenuously calls this drainage basin a private park, and in the plan development application uses the existence of this park to justify further reductions in setbacks and increased density, which caused the drainage problems in the first place. You see drainage basins nowhere else in residential development in the avenues. The very existence of this drainage basin provides a graphic illustration of just how inappropriate Ivory's building density is. In order to maximize building square footage and profit, Ivory puts FR3-sized houses onto SR1-sized lots. This, of course, has consequences such as massive retaining walls, as you've seen from the other speakers, and drainage ponds. Please deny this zoning reapplication. Thank you.
Next will be Peter Wright, followed by Jan McKinnon, and then Esther Stoll. Peter's here in person.
Good evening. I'm Peter Wright. Avenue's residents have suggested improvements that could rectify at least some of the problems with this development. We are told, however, that Ivory has already made such huge concessions that they cannot budge an inch from their current proposal. This property would ordinarily be developed with a maximum of 11 single-family homes. Ivory's first application was for 45 dwellings under FB-UN1 zone, a zone that only exists in the tracks corridors. Their current application is for 33 dwellings. This reduction in the number of dwellings was not a concession to Avenue's residents, but was made only because the planning division would not support the change to FB-UN1, a zone totally unsuited to this location. Ivory has made no concessions to accommodate the concerns of residents, and their proposal remains inappropriate and excessive. The grading scheme underlying Ivory's proposed development is fundamentally flawed and gives rise to a myriad of significant problems. In our meetings with you, we demonstrated this beyond any reasonable doubt. Avenue's residents have done so again this evening. I'm sure that in your heart of hearts, you recognize the severity of the problems associated with this development. These problems cannot in good faith be swept under the carpet to gain a few extra units of housing? Please vote no to this rezone, or at the very least impose conditions that address the very valid concerns raised by residents. Thank you.
Next is Jan McKinnon, followed by Esther Stoll, and then Beverly Cooper. Jan's here in person.
I am Jan McKinnon and will speak on behalf of the thousands of Avenues residents who have identified this project as a meritless gift to a politically powerful developer. This development does nothing to advance key city goals of affordability, walkability, and sustainability. The design concept is flawed and totally alien to the Avenues. It destroys the natural terrain, creating multi-lot terraces requiring tall retaining walls that scar the hillside. Ivory would even like to build the retaining walls in violation of the city code. Ivory is proposing to build FR3 size houses on SR1 size lots, something that most every neighborhood would oppose. North Point's only ingress and egress is compromised. With the clear cutting of all the trees, there will be a huge loss of wildlife habitat. This location is a wildland-urban interface area where fire authorities have called for proactive land use planning, not upzoning. Ivory is asking for an unprecedented use of the ADU ordinance. No rezoning is required if ADUs are the objective. Is it common for residents of a neighborhood to document their objections with thousands of written submissions to planning officials? Does the approval process require a planning division to do more than simply issue a report which summarily dismisses important inputs without a full explanation? Have we been wasting our time trying to work within a process that invites public input but doesn't feel obligated to respect it, no matter how well prepared, how well documented, and how widely shared by the public? This is a first-time experiment for Ivory, but it will come with long-term daily consequences for our Avenues neighborhood. This first-time experiment is poorly conceived and to date has been inadequately reviewed by the city. If approved as proposed, it will ultimately fail because it lacked the curative benefits of public insights. Please vote no to the rezone. Thank you.
And next will be Esther Stoll, followed by Nigel Swaby, and then Dave Alderman. Esther, you are unmuted.
Good evening. My name is Esther Stoll. I'm a resident of Poplar Grove, a beautiful community west of I-15. My comment today is intended to shine a light on the east-west disparity that exists in our city. The rezone and master plan amendment application by Ivory Development is a great example of this disparity. Last month, the City Council voted to approve the rezoning of 50 acres, 8 acres to start, to Tosa for the installation of a homeless village in my neighborhood. What many may not have known is that there were already deeply affordable housing, and affordable land for developers to build within a mile of Tosa site. Despite all the pleading, our community was told that this sort of housing is needed. Heck, housing in general is needed to address the homeless problem and lack of housing in Salt Lake City. Additionally, this rezone was followed with a lease agreement between the city and Tosa for $1 per year. Today, we're here to discuss a rezone to build beautiful cottages at market rate, with the caveat that some of the structures will have an option for a mother-in-law, one that could someday provide residual income. To those opposing this rezone, I understand your reason for wanting to protect your neighborhood. To the council, I ask you why increasing housing is only acceptable on the west side and not the avenues. The argument that there isn't much land on the east seems hollow. A little over 3 acres has been acquired by Ivory Home, and they have gone over and beyond to make this development fit incredibly well with the established architecture in the neighborhood. If the opposition is against rentals, I'd point out that 2 of your council members are renters. Will you codify economic discrimination against others in a similar situation? It appears that the motivation is to exclude people from the neighborhood. History has shown the power and wisdom we gain by connecting with those outside of our circles, yet we're still witnessing redlining and other forms of segregation right in our beloved city. To Ivory Homes and any other developer who is looking to put in this much effort on the west side, know that you have allies who will happily receive you. Thank you.
And next will be Nigel Swaby, followed by Dave Alderman, and then Maureen Bateman. Nigel is here in person.
Good evening. My name is Nigel Swaby, and I've been working as a consultant on this project since the beginning of 2021. I'd like to address two issues that have been raised regarding the public benefit of this project. The first is affordability. We've all been focusing on the price of the houses, but the real public benefit is going to be in the built-in ADUs. That's what we need to focus on when it comes to affordability. Based on comparable advertised rents, we think these units will rent somewhere between $1,500 to $1,700 a month. And that's something that one of the other commenters already made. That makes them affordable for people making 80 to 100% of the area median income in Salt Lake County. It also places additional rental units in a neighborhood where there's great scarcity. Unit size puts a natural cap on the rental price, so there's no need to add deed restrictions to control rents. There's also a lot of discussion about walkability, and there's some confusing definitions as to what it is. The 2018 Development Standard of Walkability ties safety, comfort, and amenities to define the experience. As it stands, most of this neighborhood doesn't meet the city standard. The development of this site with the proposed amenities will make it safer through sidewalks, comfortable with lighting, and the new public park, the park that's been proposed is going to be public, will provide an amenity the entire community can enjoy. We believe this rezone meets the city's goal to increase the housing stock, provide incremental, makes sense density, and create a new generation of naturally occurring affordable units. I urge you to vote for this rezone.
Next will be Dave Alderman, followed by Maureen Bateman, and then Sabrina Nielsen. Dave is here in person to speak.
Good evening. I'm Dave Alderman, and I'm here representing the Greater Avenues Community Council, positioned to maintain the current FR3 zoning. The GACC prides itself on being an active and informed community, partly due to our monthly newsletter that goes to every address in our area, in an attempt to keep everyone informed of issues. We address this rezoning issue in multiple newsletters with articles from planning, from Ivory, and from those opposed. We held several meetings on this subject with input from all parties and held 2 separate votes on 2 different versions of the plan. Because we could not meet in person and our attendance limits on Zoom account were limited, we allowed voting by email in addition to those on the Zoom meeting. The first vote was 688 to 4 in favor of the current zoning, and the second vote was 1,244 to 25 to maintain the current zoning. As you heard earlier, there was also a separate petition that was generated that garnered over 2,100 signatures opposed. Others have gone into many of the different issues that were raised, so I won't repeat those, but I do want to express one concern. The master plans adopted by the city go through an extensive process with input from the communities and wide public participation opportunities. When I was first elected as chair of the GACC, I asked about updating the Avenues master plan. And the response from planning at that time was, it's working, so why redo it? Now the Planning Commission has stated the master plan is old, therefore obsolete, and should be ignored. To arbitrarily throw out these plans in a piecemeal fashion without similar community input makes a mockery of the entire master plan process, especially when the community has registered such overwhelming support for maintaining the existing zoning and plans. If the master plan needs updating, it should be done in a thoughtful public process with input from all. Again, based on 2 overwhelming votes, the members of the GACC request that you retain the Foothills residential zoning. Thank you.
Next will be Maureen Bateman, followed by Sabrina Nelson, and then Marilyn Nelson. Maureen is here in person.
Hi, my name is Maureen Bodeman. I live a couple blocks from the proposed rezone. I am honestly nervous to stand up here in front of my community and say that I support this rezone. We have a citywide mandate to increase our housing supply. We are not talking about high-rises or even townhomes. Even in a post-rezone state, we will still definitely be low-density single-family homes. Ultimately, this is a debate over a handful of homes in a privileged community. It pains me that it is and will continue to take up your time. That said, I would love to see an affordable housing project in the Avs, and given the call tonight for affordable housing, maybe the council should consider a higher density affordable housing community. That said, I doubt that would be considered acceptable either. We also have, we've heard about public transportation being too far away and the greenhouse gas emissions would increase. Those cars exist regardless of this project. And at an average pace, 1/3 of a mile to a bus is a less than 10-minute walk. I would bet I'm actually one of the only people in this room who has taken that particular bus in the last month several times. I can personally attest that the walk from that project to the site is very reasonable. We can continue to perpetuate the sprawl out to the suburbs, contributing to the myriad of actual social and environmental problems that exist from that sprawl. Or we can provide people with reasonable, viable options within our community. I urge you to vote for this initiative. Thank you.
Next will be Sabrina Nielsen, followed by Marilyn Nielsen, and then Mark Levitt. Sabrina is here in person.
Okay, hi. My name is Sabrina Nielsen. I'm here to speak in opposition to the rezoning. I think that one thing that has unified the avenues from the humble homes to the very nice, beautiful homes has always been the quality and the fact that they were meant to last for generations. This was always something that we know about in the avenues. Many of these homes are well over 100 years old, and they contribute greatly to our historical society in the avenues. And what I can tell you is that Ivory Homes may have once had a reputation for building quality homes, but they have in recent years descended into cutting corners and doing everything they can to save themselves money in their builds. There are countless people who have commented online saying that they were promised one thing and then given something else of lesser quality. Can we trust that this is not what these people will do to us in this case? They can't be trusted to build quality things. They make these particle board homes that I have seen going up all over Utah, and particle board will not last. We are allowing people to build homes that in the heat and the cold and the widely changing temperatures will pull themselves apart. They will not last. They will become a problem and an eyesore. And we should care about that and make sure that we ensure the quality of the builds in a very seismic area. And I would like to say that the rents that they quote as being in the $1,700 range are just not accurate. My sister just recently this week moved and had to search for a place to live in the avenues and was very, very, very hard pressed to find anything affordable. They will be in excess of $2,000 or $2,200.
Next will be Marilyn Nelson, and then Susan Carter, followed by Herb Livesey. Marilyn is here in person.
Taylor, she has passed on the comment.
Okay, and next will be Susan Carter. Susan, you are unmuted. Okay, I will troubleshoot with Susan and move on to Herb Livesey, followed by Joseph Cook, and then Courtney Henley. Herb is here in person.
Thank you. My name's Herb Livesey. I've lived on the avenues all of my life. My early life was on the west side of the avenues. Right now we're living just east of Terrace Hills Drive. I come here tonight not to argue about the project. I come here to represent the people who will be impacted by that project. I am not one of them. I wanted to say that. When you live east of Terrace Hills Drive, this development will not affect us. Secondly, I'd like to thank those who have spoken this evening. I've been impressed very much with the time and effort they've taken, the review of the ordinances and the ivory production, and I've been very impressed with the detail and explanation of each and every portion of the ivory presentation. Lastly, may I just make a couple of comments on traffic? There's a lot of traffic in the morning and in the afternoon from the university and University Hospital that comes up onto 11th Avenue, comes across and either goes down B Street and to State Street and then up and off on their way to Bountiful, or they go around the Memory Grove Road and they're on their way to Bountiful. Just a couple of weeks ago, the city reduced South Temple from 15th East to 7th East to one lane. That's pushing traffic up, and I won't go further. I think you can see the problem with that. Thank you very much.
Herb.
Next is Joseph Cook, followed by Courtney Henley, and then Hillary Jacobs. Joseph's here in person.
My name is Joseph Cook. My wife and I have lived at North Point for about 30 years. We enjoy very much being there. I'm a physician. I graduated from the University of Utah 60 years ago, and I'm still practicing part-time. One of the tenets of medicine is, above all, to do no harm. And I realize you're not perhaps physicians, but you certainly could do a lot of harm by approving the ivory application, particularly in the area of safety. I think that's been well covered today. F Street is narrow. The number of cars along that street will be increased if the ivory proposal is approved. During the winter, it's very difficult both to leave North Point's gate and to approach North Point on F Street. It's slick. You need a four-wheel drive car or all-wheel drive. There's a tendency not to be able to make it up the hill and a tendency to slide down the hill. The private road that crosses F Street is narrow. The number of cars leaving that road and approaching F Street will be greatly increased. I think we're talking about a very problematic situation as far as safety is concerned. I'd like to make a couple of observations of a general sense. I'm amazed at the community reaction to this proposal. In my experience, it's so unusual to have so many people opposed to something. There must be a reason. I think we've received some superficial thoughts of what that might be, but the reasoning to me seems very well thought out and well presented in a very civil way. Ivory has presented their proposal as if they were doing a favor to the community. I don't think that's the case. Thank you.
Next will be Courtney Henley, followed by Hillary Jacobs, and then Nathan Peters. Courtney is here in person to speak.
I'm going to take a stretch. I like Councilwoman Tori's idea. I'm ready for some. Anybody? My name is Courtney. I live 4 blocks from the property, and I am an anesthesiologist at LDS Hospital. It's 8 blocks from the property. Thank you for taking public comment on this existential question for our city. Does Salt Lake City want to be one of the most beautiful cities in the world, a stunning urban citadel nestled among mountains, meadows, and wetlands? In 1987, Mayor DePaulis and the Salt Lake City Council answered that question with a resounding yes. This master plan and zoning has served Salt Lake City well for 35 years. It is the reason Salt Lake City is so spectacular. Don't throw away all the hard work and determination of our predecessors. I have lived and recreated in the Avenues for 23 years, and I've been in my home on J Street for 15 years. Please don't throw away my life's work. Some of my most precious moments of the past years have been watching the red-tailed hawk pair fledge their young in the Ponderosa at 675 F Street. This summer, the landowner removed the nest. It is so sad. The hawk family flying around wondering where to have their babies next year. Hopefully you all saw KSL 5 last week. A juvenile moose was roaming on H Street and 5th Avenue. The moose had to be tranquilized and removed by our friends at DWR. But how spectacular that we live in this low-density neighborhood buffered by low-density development, and it is so inviting to our animal friends. A mother deer and her 2 young have been wandering Upper J Street this summer. Every week they look healthier because our neighborhood values wildlife by maintaining low and very low-density development. Downtown, we are seeing skyscrapers galore. That's great. The lower avenues has plenty of low-density zoning. In 1987, our visionary leaders saw that a buffer of very low-density zoning was required to maintain the character of the community, and it has. Who are we to ignore their vision of this beautiful city and it's nurtured willy-nilly because some big-time developer wants to make double the money on the land they bought 2 years ago?
Next will be Hillary Jacobs, followed by Nathan Peters, and then Sarah Van Voris. Hillary is here in person.
Hey, I'm Hillary Jacobs, and I live in Salt Lake City. The purported goal of the zoning change requested by Ivory Homes for the Avenues development is to increase population density and thus available housing in the Avenues. This is a laudable goal. Moreover, as an Avenues resident, I would embrace zoning changes that will bring an increasingly economically diverse community. However, while the additional lots and proposed ADUs would marginally increase the population density in the Avenues, the number of units they would create is trivial, in the range of 20 to 30 additional units tops. Of greater concern to me, however, is the fact that these additional units will in no way increasing housing affordability in the Avenues. Given the cost of each house and its associated ADU, only the very wealthy will be able to buy the houses, and only the wealthy will be able to afford to rent the attached units, given that many of these ADUs will likely be used as, the attached units, and given that many of these ADUs will likely be used as short-term Airbnb rentals, they won't even increase the city's available housing. Let's focus our zoning and building efforts on true equity rather than millionaire welfare. Please vote against the spurious zoning changes. Thank you.
Next will be Nathan Peters, followed by Sarah Von Voris, and then Peter Gambroulis. Nathan is here in person.
Good evening, neighbors and council members. My name is Nathan Peters. My wife and I currently live downtown, but I've always loved the Avenues and have envisioned living in the Avenues long term. Part of the reason is the passion that people have for their neighborhood, which many of you have demonstrated this evening. I'm here to voice support for Capital Park Cottages, and to those among the opposition, I'd ask you to consider that there are people and families who would love to have a home like those that Ivory is seeking to develop, and surely those people and families will be great neighbors to you, perhaps people like me and my family. My wife and I recently relocated her widowed mother from Las Vegas to Salt Lake, and a home with an ADU would be perfect for us to help have her close by while giving her independence. We wouldn't expect to charge her rent, but it would be a great benefit to us for childcare purposes, as we recently welcomed our first son to the world in October. A great majority of the arguments of those opposed stand contrary to sensible housing needs and goals outlined in Growing Salt Lake and 5-year housing plans. We have to acknowledge that land use and housing needs change and have changed since the Avenues Master Plan was implemented more than 30 years ago. And certainly, if only 9 to 11 homes are built here, it's incredibly unlikely that me, like many potential homeowners, could afford the associated market rate. Again, I would ask everyone to appreciate that you will gain great neighbors in this community, potentially like me and my family, who love this area as much as you do. In line with the Planning Commission's recommendation, I would urge the council to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Next will be Sarah Van Voris, then Peter Gambroulis, followed by Mary Lou Rates. Sarah is here in person.
Good evening. Thank you for your service, council members. My name is Sarah Van Voris, and I live in the lower avenues. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, and I'm a practicing attorney. I would like to speak to the legal requirements defined in the purpose statement of each city zoning ordinance. Citywide master plans do not override the ordinances, which remain the governing legal document. Ivory's request for a rezone from FR3 to SR1 must be denied if the city is going to comply with the legal requirements stated in its own ordinances. The purpose statement of the SR1 ordinance states that, quote, uses are intended to be compatible with the existing scale and intensity of the neighborhood. The ordinance also requires that new development must, quote, preserve the existing character of the neighborhood. The houses Ivory proposes are of a size and character far more typical of those found in the FR3 zone. These homes are at least 2 times the square footage of the average SR1 home. I live in the lower East Avenues on P Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. When you walk or drive through the lower avenues, you certainly see high density on our postage stamp lots, but I think it's undeniable that the lower avenues of Salt Lake, which is the city's first neighborhood, is one of the most beautiful in the city. And I assert that this is because we wisely preserve the existing character of the neighborhood. And this was not to the detriment of providing housing to even large families or groups of people, like the family of 6 who live 2 houses down from me, or the 5 University of Utah students that live in the house directly behind me. All of Ivory's proposed houses are large 2-story buildings, and Ivory's plan to build 19 large 2-story buildings onto shrunken lots with reduced setbacks drastically increases the scale and intensity of the area. Quote, scale and intensity, that's what's in the governing ordinance. These homes are not going to house larger groups of people than the houses in my neighborhood. There's only one reason that Ivory wants more square footage, and it has nothing to do with providing more people with affordable housing. Thank you.
Next will be Peter Gambroulis, followed by Tolliver Drake, and then Jill Kinney. Peter is here in person.
Thank you, council members, for having me again. I hope to be brief. I just wanted to take an opportunity because last time in the work session, several council members had some points that they brought up, some suggestions and some metrics and key considerations that I wanted to touch on. I won't have time during these 2 minutes, but I did submit a shorter but more thorough response than I'll give today. The council and several of the public today have referenced that rezones are often looked at in terms of what they can provide a community for affordability, sustainability, walkability, and historic preservation. While none of these, or excuse me, while some of these may not be completely in line with this particular project, I'm here today to tell you that all 4 are better served by the SR1A zone than they would be by the FR3. Quickly, in terms of affordability, and what has been brought up much by the public, is that the FR3 would allow 11 homes. The SR1A would allow up to 27. We're saying that we would go with 19. The fact is these homes would be cheaper, and this is not including the ADU component, which is our major affordability component, but is not related exactly to the rezone. In terms of walkability, this is the one where it really doesn't tie in. However, the fact is the avenues are walkable. They're very popular with walkers, joggers, runners. They're close to City Creek trails. Walkability is not just flat. Walkability can mean something that's comfortable and safe to walk in. In terms of historic preservation, again, this does not include historic homes, but has been brought up by the council. There are historic trees here. In either case, if this was developed under FR3 or SR1, it would lead to the removal of some or most of the trees. The zoning does not preserve the trees right now. And then finally, in sustainability. The sustainable components of these is the fact that compact development is more sustainable than large lot development. The fact is that we gain an efficiency by housing more homes. Excuse me, thank you.
And next will be Tolliver Drake, followed by Jill Kinney. Tolliver, you are unmuted.
Thank you very much. My name is Drake Tolliver. I live over in the Avenues, and I'm an aerospace and structural engineer for Rolls-Royce. While others have made excellent points as to the lack of value for affordability, sustainability, and increased density, I just want to speak to one thing that significantly shown on the project to me, and that is the long-term structural requirements of the project, specifically with the retaining walls up to 17 feet. These retaining walls in high-density rural residential areas with significant elevation changes have significant additional requirements that I saw not addressed in the Ivory Homes proposal. I've been involved in a few development projects where water table changes and significant changes and variations in the season have long-term structural impacts on these developments. And while I've not seen the detailed construction plans for these walls because they were not currently available in the detail that we need, no analysis is included in the Ivory Homes proposal on the long-term wear, maintenance plans, or insurance requirements for residents of the homes that they are proposing. And while I don't want to speak to the financial resources of anyone buying these $2+ million homes, I have significant reservations on the ability of individuals to repair the significant damage that is likely to occur in this type of construction without additional considerations in the plan. I've seen many developers build these types of structures and then either dissolve or remove any responsibility for maintenance. And I don't want to see that happen in the beautiful environment that we have here in the Avenues, and therefore I endorse declining their proposal. Thank you very much.
And next will be Jill Kinney. Jill, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to speak.
All right, and then we just got one additional person who registered, John Kennedy, who is in person.
Jason?
Hello, my name is John Kennedy. I'm a retired 3rd District Court judge, and I live in the area. Lived there about 15 years. You've heard tonight a litany of reasons why this should not be approved. It simply doesn't fit any of the city's standards for affordability, walkability, sustainability, and it has many legal problems. It doesn't fit. And I think, to paraphrase a argument made in another context by a different lawyer, if it doesn't fit, you should reject. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Janie Matthews, who is in person.
Good to be last. Good evening, I'm Janie Mathis. I'm an internal medicine physician. I live at 688 F Street, which is right across the street from Ivory's development. I like to call myself a NIMFY, N-I-M-F-Y, instead of, not in my front yard, instead of NIMBY, is so often touted by Ivory to minimize the Avenue's residents' legitimate input. Ivory, ironic coming from Ivory, calling us NIMBYs, who makes a net $624 million revenue in 2021. We are simply citizens who want to maintain the beauty and charm of our neighborhood. We bought our lot in 2014, started construction in 2015 due to numerous city regulations and permits prior to building. We were required to have the completed house and landscape architectural plans prior to any construction. We're zoned for SR1A with a height restriction of 23 feet and 45-foot front setback. Our lot is approximately 0.42 acres. We requested 2 extra feet of height, and we were denied by the city. We removed 2 feet of dirt at a cost of $60,000. Ivory wants SR1 zoning to have 28-foot heights. Why should Ivory be granted this change? If zoning is changed, why shouldn't Ivory be held to SR1A like the surrounding F Street lots? I was denied a zoning change for 2 feet on a lot of 0.42 acres. What reasons does Ivory have for a zoning exception for 28-foot height for an entire city block? What reason does the city planning and the city council have to approve that? We live at the end of F Street, which is a virtual choke point for any kind of disaster or fire evacuation, with North Point having only one ingress and egress. We, the Avenues residents, are actually the underdogs. We are only asking that Ivory be held to exactly the same rules, same zoning, same regulations that we were held to. Protect our neighborhood and value people over corporations. Hold Ivory to the original FR3 zoning.
Thank you,
This
Jane.
project does nothing to solve Salt Lake City housing issues. It only adds to the net
Thank you.
worth of
Time's up.
Ivory.
And next will be Jason Bresley. Jason, you are now unmuted.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to pretty much summarize what I understand for the whole meeting. This whole proposal is all about greed, greed, greed from Ivory Homes. And it sounds as though if it gets passed, the next question would be who's taking their money from the city council. Please do not accept this proposal. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
And that was the final registered commenter.
Are we, is that the end of the comments? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
You were clapping, I couldn't hear.
Thank you for those who made comments. I will look for a motion.
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, can I take a point of personal privilege?
Go ahead, Councilmember Wharton.
Thank you. So this property's on a slope with approximately 50-foot grade change from the highest point to the lowest and would require significant retaining walls that we've heard a lot about. The most concerning points separate the only road that's in and out of the existing North Point community. A retaining wall higher than 4 feet with terraces less than 3 feet, I feel would be unsafe for both for residents on both sides of that. This is not a speculative concern, as many commenters have pointed out. Just a few 100 feet from this exact property on this exact same road, North Capitol Boulevard, the retaining walls that were approved by engineers to hold up the backyards of several single-family homes failed, and that hazard hazard created by that was that these backyards spilled out onto Capitol Park Boulevard. So that was one hazard. If this road were to fail, these retaining walls were to fail, it would be a road sliding into someone's home or a brick wall sliding into someone's home. So if there is a majority on the council that is supportive of this rezone, I would ask that we at least consider a conditional approval that would require all retaining walls in the project be in accordance with existing city code, which is 21A 36020B. And I would ask staff to work on that in between now and the next meeting.
Councilmember Wharton, any other comments before we?
I would like to follow up some questions though. When was those? When did these walls fail? Do we remember the approximate year?
It would have been before 2017.
Okay.
Does anyone in the audience know exactly when that happened? The Capitol Park.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were built early 2000s. They failed sometime in the last.
Thereafter.
Yes. So could we say that could we? I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I don't think, as far as I know, none of us are. And I also want to believe that the engineers behind this project, those tasked to make this happen and drawing these walls, will over-engineer, using this word many times, over-engineer the current plans to make sure that they are safe. I'm sure that there is some liability if these walls were to collapse into houses. So why, I feel like we are getting in the middle of the plan in a way that potentially, I think what you're trying to do is making these walls wider so there is less houses into this project. And I think when we're talking about density, this is a very low dense project. So I have struggles to believe that I have troubles to believe that this is about safety, but more about making less houses in this property. And all density is happening, all heavy densing, for those that just made comments, is happening in my district. And not all density should happen in my district. Density needs to happen in every district in this city, regardless if it is affordable or not. So I think that we're getting in the minutia about, is this wall safe or not? And I will put this question into Ivory to respond, how they're going to make this wall safe, to make sure that it doesn't collapse into houses, which is something that I also don't want. But I think your intent is different than what we are trying to accomplish here. And I think that, again, I will stand by this. This is a very low dense project. It should be actually denser than this.
Well, I don't really anticipate arguing this. I have a number of concerns with the project, just one of which is safety. And I'm being very genuine when I raise that. And I don't think that, all of you that are on this, that serve with me on the council know me and know what's in my heart and how I operate. And I wouldn't bring this up if I didn't have it as a genuine concern.
Can I do a point of order? We don't have a motion. This was supposed to be a point of personal privilege. We've gotten way procedurally in the woods.
Peter Eschler, I think we should.
I agree. Sorry.
Move on the
Mr. Chair.
public hearing, and then we can continue discussion in
Well,
another work session if that's what we want, or we can.
This is what I, as a council member, am asking staff to do, which I'm allowed to ask for.
Sure.
And I feel that I am allowed to respond to statements that about what the motives are what my motives are for asking for this. So thank you for giving me that time.
Councilmember Fowler, did you have a point?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion to this motion? Okay,
I will just make one discussion on this. I understand the concern of the retaining walls, and I understand and I hear your point on the request to make sure that the retaining walls and the safety of the building and engineering goes by the building codes and the city codes. So I agree. I understand that portion of it. Just want to make that point clear.
Great. So we have some things that we've asked staff to do. The motion was to close the public hearing and defer action. That was by Councilmember Fowler, seconded by Councilmember Peter Eschler. If there's no other discussion, I'll call the motion. Councilmember Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. Sorry, we don't, it's not a venue for that kind of a conversation, but the motion was just to close the public hearing. No action has been taken. That takes us to section C of our, let me double check. Section C of our agenda. These are potential action items. The first one is item C1, an alley vacation at approximately 925 South, 1200 West.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that the council adopt the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, the motion was by Councilmember Fowler, seconded by Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion to this motion? Okay, I'll start with Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
And Peter Eschler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes 6-0 with one council member absent. The next item is C2, an ordinance regarding stealth tower amendments. I'll look for a motion.
Chair, I move that the council adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion is by Councilmember Peter Eschler and seconded by Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion? I actually have one just quick thing I'd like to say. I am not supportive of this, not because I don't support the creation of the tower. I think that's needed and that we need to do that. I just am not supportive of it being a stealth tower disguised as a tree, as I've mentioned in previous comments. So, but I am supportive of the tower being, I don't want to get in the way of the necessary infrastructure. So that's.
Are we at the discussion point right now?
That's just my discussion on the motion. Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I just want to say that these stealth towers are on public land for safety use properties. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question. Councilmember Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
And I'm a no, so that passes 5-1.
Valdemore's absent.
With Valdemar absent. The next item is item C3, a resolution about the Salt Lake City International Airport Master Plan.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to move that the council adopt a resolution approving the airport master plan with the following addition to the resolution to amend the master plan. The master plan will include an amendment as appendix to the document with the following. The council is adding these priority points to the plan and its ongoing capital implementation. The airport and its partners will focus design and practice on reducing carbon footprint resulting from all single occupancy vehicle traffic to the airport, and the airport and its partners will focus on strategies to meet the needs of customers who experience the long walk as a high barrier and even hardship, including those who don't qualify normally for accessibility accommodations. I further move that the council adopt the following legislative intents related to the adoption of the airport master plan. The council recommends advancing the first priority through jointly convening one or more multi-partner transit-focused meetings or public meeting briefings in collaboration with the administration and key departments the administration that it identifies. Likely the Department of Airports, the Department of Sustainability, and the Transportation Division of the Department of Community and Neighborhoods. Collaboration is also likely to include outside partners like UTA, Utah Transit Authority, Utah Department of Transportation, airlines, and airport vendors. Topics will include, but not limited to, encouraging, facilitating, or incentivizing enhanced transit or shared ride access for employees who work at the Salt Lake City International Airport. And these collaboration efforts will identify policy opportunities to address air quality issues through transit and carbon reduction measures.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Pui and a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion? I'll start with Councilmember Pui.
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously 6-0 with one council member absent.
I'm sorry, could I ask for clarification?
Yes.
Were you, was the motion to put that into the appendix or was it to put it into the master plan?
That's a good question. So I think it belongs in the master plan. Those are legislative intents, the second part, but I don't know. Yeah,
Right.
so.
Okay, so the first part, because we were trying to work with the airport we thought it might have a little more noticeability if it were in the attachment as a separate council thing, but it's up to you guys, so you voted, now we know. Thank you, just wanted to clarify.
I just want to clarify, my understanding is that the first part is going to be an appendix that is amended into the master plan, and the legislative intents are not.
Yes.
Okay, I thought maybe the motion was to put it right into the master plan.
Not an
It's in
appendix
the-
to it?
It's in there, but
It's in
not
it.
in that main section. Okay, that's what we thought you were
Was that
going
your
to do.
intent?
That's
Yes,
what we
that was.
thought.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay, thanks.
Okay, I guess we're now to section D, which is the comment section. The first item is D1, questions from the mayor to the city council. Thank you, Mayor, for being here. Oh.
To the mayor.
To the mayor from the city council. Well, you can ask us questions too if you'd like. Does anyone have questions for the mayor? Thank you always for being here and being part of our meetings. D2 is comments to the City Council. These are comments to the City Council from the public. So we are now at the comments portion of our agenda, and we'll hear comments on general topics and items not scheduled for a hearing tonight. I went over the council's rules of decorum earlier, and those rules apply here as well. I'll read them again. We are accepting comments in person, online via WebEx. Isaac Canedo on our staff is moderating the meeting and will message attendees as needed. Taylor Hill on our staff will call the names of those who wish to comment based on the order of registration received or receive comment cards. Once we open public comment, Taylor will announce 3 names at a time so that people have some notice and can prepare to speak. When it is your turn to speak for people on WebEx, she will unmute your line and you may begin. If you are here in person, please step to the podium and make your comment once Taylor announces your name. To begin, please state your name and your 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, the host will announce time and your microphone will be muted. If you're unable to finish your comment, please send the rest via email, mail, or call our office. Our contact information is available in the meeting room and in the WebEx chat. If you no longer wish to speak, please either message our staff or when staff states your name, let us know that you're just here to listen. And with that, Taylor, will you please begin with our first general comment?
First, we will hear from Mark Levitt, followed by Timothy Schomburg, and then Jason Bresley. Mark, you are unmuted.
Mark, are you there?
Okay, moving on to Timothy Schomburg. Timothy, you're unmuted. Okay, let's move on to Jason Bresley. Jason, you are unmuted.
That's everyone?
Let's give it a second because
Sure it's not a
it could
technical.
very well be a technical issue. Taylor, do you think the folks have hung up, or do you think we have a technical issue?
I'm guessing many have tuned out, but let me message with them real quick.
Was it just those 3 public
they're
comments,
Sorry.
Taylor?
Yes.
Is there anyone in the audience that wants to make a general comment today on anything not on the agenda? Should we move on and then
Sure.
do the consent? Is that all that's left? Yeah. Okay, we'll wait for just a minute, Taylor. We'll move on to the item G while we see if there's a technical error.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilmember Pui. Any discussion on this motion?
Just a question on budget amendment number 4. Oh, that's just setting the date. Never mind. Sorry.
Oh. Okay, no more discussion. I will start with Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Peter Ashler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes 6-0 with 1 councilmember absent. How are we doing up there, Taylor?
I can just try and call on all of them once more. I got confirmation from one that they don't want to speak, so I can just go through the other 2 one more time.
Well, I think we've tried it.
If you were trying to make a comment and you weren't able to, we apologize. Please feel free to email us, and we have general comment on any of our public meetings. I think we'll go ahead and close the general comment period. We don't need a motion for that, do we?
Correct, you do not.
Okay, and then do we need a motion to return to?
You just adjourn this meeting.
We just adjourn this. Okay, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Oh, we don't do that, right? I just do this. Adjourned.
And then we're going to, because we're just recessing from the closed session. So good.